This is the fourth part of my series on 2.10 experiments, the level 2 statistics standard. Today we're looking at analysing the graphs we drew last time. Again, this is around a paired experiment. So the two graphs we drew was this one, which was a box plot. This box plot in particular tells us about the spread of the data and also tells us about the difference between the two tests. So I had a number of items in the first test and the number of items in the second test, and this has subtracted the first from the second. So when we talk about this, we want to look at things like the spread of the data. We probably would mention what's most common and perhaps the mean. And it's quite good to remember about our CSSI and OSIM, where we can use that if possible. So centre, spread, shape, interesting, and obvious, specific, evidence, and meaning. Those are important parts when we are deciphering our statistical graphs. The second graph we looked at was this one, which is an arrow graph or a bootlace graph. In this one, we need to realise that each arrow represents a participant. So we want to talk about the direction of the arrows and what that's telling us. We've also got this part up here, which tells us how many of each move upwards. So that's the blue ones going upwards. No shift is our black ones. And we've got a lot of shift downwards. You can see that some are darker red. That means that more than one participant went from 12 to 8. We've also got our statistics on the left-hand side here. We're interested in perhaps the range, the median, the mean, and what it is showing us about the gain from our participants from our first trial to our second trial. So we will write about how many they have, and perhaps if there's anything interesting, we would write about that also. So here's an example, perhaps, of what we might write. It's a bit brief. We probably could write a bit more than this, and especially about what it is telling us. But from this graph, we can see that a downward shift of 2 was the most common, because there's our dot plot of 2. This means that the most common outcome was that students remembered 2 less items after the break. That's my meaning, my explanation. It was interesting to see that one student remembered 8 less. So I probably want to try and figure out how far that student had moved. The mean shift from here is 1.7, negative 1.7. So that means a decline of over the whole lot of 1.7 words averaged out. We've also got 4 in the positive, which is quite interesting, and 5 that stayed the same, though we may not talk about those. Up here we can see that the middle 50% only moved between negative 2.5, let's say, and 0. So that's not a grand shift. That there was quite a lot happening that in these 5 here, that tells us a story about some particular participants. Perhaps they didn't try as hard to remember. Perhaps they gave up, lost interest, whatever. We can talk about that in our conclusion. So for this one, the arrow graph, we can specifically see what is going on. So that particular person who lost 8, so he went from 12 down to 4, seems a lot of loss, so there might have been something else going on there. We might later find out from the participant why they think they did that, but in our actual analysis of our graphs, it's not important. So if we look at this particular one, we can see that there's a lot of red, a lot of people losing their memory, their ability to remember the things in our test. So 20 out of the 29 remembered less than in the second trial. 5 students stayed the same, that's from up here, and 4 students actually managed to remember more, though they did not remember very many in the first one and then remembered 1 more in the second one. So not the people who remembered the most. This person here is quite interesting because he remembered, or she remembered, the most of 15 and then only dropped 1 to 14. So they obviously have quite good memory. And this one, of course, was the one that we're interested in. The mean and median we can find over here. So the median was 12 for the first trial and 10 for the second. So there was a decrease between the first and the second trial. And the range is also quite interesting in that the range in the first trial was just 15 minus 8 is 7, and the range in the second trial was 14 minus 4 is 10. So that's quite interesting as well, because that will mean that there's more variety, more variance in the second trial than there was in the first trial. Yep, that 11 is probably wrong. So we won't worry about that at the moment. Yeah, so you can probably write more things. You need to think about what is telling the story of what your particular intervention and experiment was about. Have you found anything in here that is interesting that you'd like to talk about more? Perhaps those dark red ones there, seems that that was quite a common score, and that there's a lot of fall off from 12, which is interesting. Yeah.